that no matter how much I disclaimed it and said, look, this is just one way, that people were going to be like, oh, I can't believe you said that. No, 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 no. I knew it. And it's fine. Whatever. I'm used to it. It's people get triggered and whatever. Um, and I knew what I was saying was somewhat contrary to a lot of things that I've recommended in the past. Well, again, I've been talking about this shit for over 10 years. So things change, right? Over that time period, especially technologically, the developments that have occurred over the past decade alone.
Power on.
Real-time Sovryn is go.
Ooh, the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star. Wait a minute, is this going on? Is this going out worldwide? Got the satellite uplink going? We got it? We got it. All right. Oh, do we have a fun subject to get into this week? And really, I mean it. You might not think so. You might say to yourself, what could be fun about talking about email? Well, let me assure you, there are some fun things to talk about with email. This will be part 2 in our cybersecurity series, and I think it's actually a fitting way to continue the conversation overall. And the reason I say that is we want to get into something I've talked about on my show, Sovryn Tech, for really over a decade, but something that I've talked about many times, that being what's called account minimalism. Okay, so the idea is you make as few accounts as possible. And we want to break that down, but the key part to account minimalism, even if you think you already know about account minimalism because you've heard me talk about it before, I guarantee you haven't heard me talk about it in this way. And there is a very key bit of information that I want to get into um, that really, will puts this concept, makes it a lot more viable and a lot safer to engage in. Okay, because it's very easy to say, well, wait a minute, if I engage in account minimalism and I put all my eggs in one basket, I'm screwed if I lose access to that account. Well, we're going to get into how can you keep from losing access perhaps to that account, or at least if you do lose access to that account, what you can do to mitigate that problem. Okay, so we're going to get into that in this cybersecurity subseries, part 2 of the cybersecurity subseries. But I got to tell you, before I take even a peek at what emails have come in for me overnight, one thing I do, I instantly, well, first off, I brew some coffee and I get ready to go with just and especially right now on Ice Planet Zero, those temperatures are dropping, baby, and I want it hot. Okay, so I make my coffee. Once I have my coffee, then I'm ready to watch radar. Wait, no, that's not how that goes. Once I have my once I have my coffee, um, I also like to extend the effect of that coffee without having to drink entire hoddles of coffee. And what I do is I reach for my little bottle of Magic Mind. Okay, seriously, Magic Mind. This stuff has L-theanine in it, which if you've never heard about this, okay, the research around this is fascinating about L-theanine's ability to extend the effects of basically of coffee, but really of caffeine. Okay. And not only that, all right, this gives you my again, little shot, this little mental performance shot. Okay. It also has 100% of your daily vitamin C and vitamin D needs. And when the temperature's dropping, okay, especially depending upon latitude, longitude you're on, when it starts dropping, you're not getting all the vitamin D you need from the sun. It's impossible. Okay, depending upon where you're located. So this is really, really key for me. And I mean, even, in the winter months, I, I might end up drinking, more coffee than I normally would. Okay. Uh, for a couple of reasons, like again, part of it is just to feel that warmth. Okay. But the nice thing is that, again, I don't have to do hodls and hodls of caffeinated coffee because I'm already hitting Magic Mind. In fact, this was happening last week where I was able to do more decaf than caffeinated. Why? Because I didn't need more caffeine. Because for me, Magic Mind was taking me the distance throughout the day. So even though I want that warm drink, okay, or maybe I could go with tea, maybe, instead of just having, constant caffeination, okay, I'm just going for decaf and letting the L-theanine in Magic Mind do the heavy lifting, as it were. Okay. I absolutely love Magic Mind. You need to give this shot a shot. If you're looking to boost that mental performance. Okay. And again, like I said, got your vitamin C and vitamin D, your daily recommended, like 100% got you covered here. Okay. That can eliminate other supplements if you so desire. But I get one of these a day, way before I start opening my email. I'm hitting my coffee and I'm hitting my Magic Mind. And if you want to hit Magic Mind, actually got a great deal for you. Why don't you go to magicmind.com/sovryn? Okay. Use that link. That way they know where you came from. Magicmind.com/sovryn. Use the code Sovryn20, just like my name, SOVRYN20. Use the code Sovryn20 and you can get 48% off your first subscription, or whatever you're ordering, you get a 20% off one-time purchase. So magicmind.com, magicmind.com/sovryn, and then make sure you use that code Sovryn20 for me, okay? And you're going to get the hookup. And again, give it time. Let this build up on you. Let Magic Mind, you might not feel it the first day, second, third day, just let it keep building up, building up. That's what I did. And, I don't want to go a morning without it. So magicmind.com/sovryn, use that code Sovryn20. Now, let's talk about email, shall we? Because there's a lot to talk about. So, in the previous episode of the sub-series that we're doing here on cybersecurity on Real-Time Sovryn, I talked about device minimalism. That's actually the title of the episode. And in that, I was discussing, just as a quick recap, I was discussing how you really want to to engage in 21st century, we're in 2024 right now, going forward, best cybersecurity practices based upon the conventional methods of civilization that we all live under, okay, or that most of us live under anyway. I can't claim we all do. A good practice is to actually have, don't have a million devices, right? In fact, for security's sake, the device that actually handles most of your important affairs, okay, you may want to break that down to one device. And in the episode that I did, I had recommended, and again, by no means, I said I was going to respond to some of the emails. I'm going to save that for like a larger Q&A for this sub-series. I had so many people, and I knew this was coming. Like I knew it. I knew it. That people were going to respond negatively that I was recommending an iPhone. Okay, I wasn't really recommending an iPhone. I kept saying over and over again. In fact, I wasn't even saying necessarily smartphone. I kept saying over and over and over again that what I was, if you want to use the term recommending, I kept saying over and over again, it's not the only way. It may not fit your threat model. You can apply what I am saying to any device to pretty much any device you want, however you want to do it. Okay. Wasn't telling anybody to give up things, wasn't telling anybody to throw something out, wasn't saying anything like that. I knew that was going to happen. And honestly, I also knew that no matter how much I disclaimed, how much I made a disclaimer saying, you set this up with, you want to use Android, use Android. You want to use Windows, use Windows. You want to use Linux, use Linux. All the better, actually, if you're using Linux. Whatever. Yeah, Android is blah, 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 blah. I've been a tech journalist for so long. I know. Okay. I was still, I knew that no matter how much I disclaimed it and said, look, this is just one way, that people were going to be like, oh, I can't believe you said that. Oh, no, no, no. I knew it. And it's fine. Whatever. I'm used to it. It's people get triggered and whatever. Um, and I knew what I was saying was somewhat contrary to a lot of things that I've recommended in the past. Well, again, I've been talking about this shit for over 10 years. So things change, right? Over that time period, especially technologically, the developments that have occurred over the past decade alone, you know, if I didn't slightly alter what I was saying, I mean, A, how boring, but B, I could get into a whole side subject about, I always worry about people that are like so, they're like hedgehogs, kind of burying their head in the sand, right? And you can tell that they're burying their head in the sand. And when you bury your head in the sand, do you want to know what happens? Okay, you lose adaptability. Okay. Now, some people like to think, well, and as I often say, only the paranoid survive, right? Well, this is true. But that's just as true. Only the paranoid survive. I could just as easily say that only the adaptable survive as well. And I mean, that that's just an evolutionary fact. Okay. I mean, humanity's actually, the human being's strength actually comes from its ability to adapt to so much. But you go burying your head in the sand, and you never hear some kind of alteration or integration of new information. Um, I question your adaptability. And are you really, are you in some sense just being a guardian of the familiar? Are you in some sense just being, are you just stuck in your ways and you don't like anything new and all this stuff? I just, you you have to, like, at some point, when as you continue to learn, if you continue to learn, and I guess that's the if you continue to learn, you will come up with different ideas, new ideas. Maybe your baseline won't necessarily change, but that's just your baseline. Outside of that, you've got to be supremely adaptable. And that's a big reason that I'm doing this cybersecurity subseries, is because I want you to be able to be adaptable to the world that we live in. Okay. And again, you want to run off and go live in a cave, like, 10,000%. I am so behind you in that choice. I think you are making a wonderful choice, but that's not all of us, or at least it's not all of us yet, or whatever. Okay. But if you did that, I mean, again, dynamite. I don't know how you're listening to the show, but dynamite. like, like I said in the last episode, you are doing it so right. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about, now that we got device minimalism out of the way, as in decrease the amount of attack vectors possible through having fewer devices. Maybe you still have a Windows gaming PC or something. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't use that, and this is nothing new for me. I've said this years ago. Don't use that for your banking, for your cryptocurrency, for your whatever. Don't use it for all the shit that matters. Just keep it off to the side. Maybe like even cordon off at the router end of things, you know, uh, and and game on it, and that's all that you do. Okay, so um, that was the point of device minimalism. It's not saying you can't have a bunch of devices. It's just saying that the important shit to protect your digital life, which is part and parcel of your physical life now, if you live in modern civilization. Okay. Um, get that down to one device. And my recommendation was, and part of the reason I was recommending an iPhone is because an iPhone is effectively infinitely replicable, meaning that Apple encrypts and stores, the entire setup of your iPhone. And depending upon if you have the information stored in iCloud, and save that way on your device, then you constantly have access to everything. And so if you need to destroy your phone, or you lose your phone, or get stolen or something like that, you have mitigations against these things. Okay. And also, again, with an iCloud account, you can, or with Apple, there are lots of great ways to where you can remotely brick um, your iPhone, which is good. You want to be able to do that. Okay. Now, people will, of course, say, well, but the government can do that to my iPhone too. Look, the government can do that to any computer you've got. If the government wants to fucking brick your machine, they're going to do it. Okay. Like, I'm not telling you like how to prevent that from happening because I don't think that there's a way unless, you're running a little device with Tails OS or something along those lines. And again, great, but you're also not going to do a lot of modern things with Tails OS, right? Like there's just lots of things that are par for the course for people's physical digital life that you can't engage in just by the nature of the way that the web browser alone and the security is set up within the operating system to be able to do that. Okay, so that's not what we're talking about here. All right, we're talking about being able to, I don't know, go to Panera Bread, right? Get some writing done, some video editing done, whatever, and just like just do normal shit that a lot of us still have to do because we haven't, cashed in our check yet, as it were. Right? Okay? You got where I'm coming from? Because I think that's most of us. And you can message me if it's not. And again, like if you found the way to like not have to live this way anymore and you're comfortable and you're getting your fuck on every day and all the stuff and great, like please, I am begging you to email me and tell me how you did it because believe me, I want to know. Otherwise, a lot of us either have to do 9 to 5 or we're doing, our side hustle or our primary hustle and our, um, whatever. Okay. So, again, if you've figured it out how to not be in the system, and it didn't cost you, you didn't have to make your millions or even your multi high six figures or something like that. Like, go ahead and let me know. And honestly, you should be doing a podcast. And I'm not saying that in like I'm not being nasty in saying that. I fucking mean it. You should be doing a podcast and telling people how to do this. Okay? All right. So all that preamble out of the way. I had to spend 10 minutes on preamble to get that out. Let's talk about this. Okay. So account minimalism. So hopefully that disclaimer like came across that, I know none of this is perfect. And ultimately when you get into, nation state actors, like in many ways, you're many ways you're completely screwed. Okay, we'll try to mitigate a little bit here when we talk about this, but let's get into it. So, account minimalism is quite simply, it's just like device minimalism, but it has to do with accounts that you have, digital accounts. Okay, I'm not necessarily talking about bank accounts. That's a whole separate conversation really to be had, and I don't necessarily feel qualified to have that kind of conversation. I mean, if you're trying to protect wealth, Bitcoin might be your best option. Okay. Having like 3 or 4 bank accounts, I don't know. All right. Like that's not my purview. All right. I mean, do I like to think myself well versed in OPSEC? Yes, but like, what to do with banks and all that stuff, that shit changes all the time. Okay, but if you want to hold on to wads of cash or Bitcoin or something like that, okay, separate conversation, and certainly we will talk about cryptocurrencies within this series. Okay, but right now we're talking about account minimalism. So the primary point to get out with this, okay, is basically pick one of the tech giants because if you're engaging in device minimalism and you have that one device, it's a good bet, what is the operating system you're using, right? Are you using Windows? Are you using Android? Are you using iOS slash Mac OS slash iPad OS slash whatever, you know, prefix that that Apple will put in front of the word OS or will put at OS. Um, Watch OS, I don't know, whatever. Believe me, I'd love it if Watch OS was the only device I needed, but it's not yet anyway, and maybe never will be. So, what operating system are you using? This is the first question to ask yourself. Okay, if you are using Windows, and I guess I'll break these down. Okay, so because depending upon what operating system you're using, and if it's Linux, a little bit of a separate story, but I'll talk about that. Okay, depending upon what operating system you're using, that kind of leads in certain directions as far as what makes the most sense for the kind of primary account for you to have. Okay, and this primary account is ultimately going to be beholden to your email. So that's why I say email is important here, and we have to have that conversation. Okay, so if you are using Microsoft Windows, you might want to consider going with, um, a Microsoft account being your main account. Okay. Your main account that will do what? Your main account that will store your photos, your main account that will handle your email right through Outlook. Okay. Your main account that will also, and this is really key, that will handle your perhaps your passwords, your one-time pins, and your passkeys. Okay. Um, or like every aspect that a lot of these can handle, because now you can say it's all under one roof, right? I understand that. We're going to address that in a minute. Okay, but let's keep going over this. So if you want to, if you don't want a phone to be your primary, your one device, right? And you want it to be your laptop or something, and you're using Microsoft Windows, then go with that. Now, this, in my opinion, is ultimately the least secure of the bunch, even though I like a lot of what Microsoft does, especially when it comes to like the Microsoft Authenticator app has become really powerful over the years, to the point that it does do one-time pins. It also gives you that, like, a Microsoft account can literally be passwordless. Okay, where you have the Microsoft Authenticator app and you just tap it when you're trying to log in on another device, and away you go. Okay, and that's really really slick, because removing the passwords from your account is a great way to get on some security. Now, passkeys are a separate conversation. There have been recent developments to the spec. I was not positive on passkeys. Ultimately, I'm still not. Okay, I really want, I mean, in some ways, it's all through the FIDO Alliance, which, is part of what created the standards that allowed for YubiKeys to be a thing, which I'm certainly a big fan of. Okay. But I was not really bullish on passkeys. I'm still ultimately not. But is it better than passwords? Yeah, in some ways. Okay. Do I wish we went with Steve Gibson's Squirrel software? Yes, of course I do. Okay, but passkeys are kind of here. Now, something that was added to the spec recently with passkeys is the ability to export and import passkeys into other password managers and into other accounts. This was one of the major negatives about passkeys, was they were, if you, depending upon how you set them up, they may be attached to your Microsoft account, they may be attached to your Google account or your Apple account, and they can't be exported or put anywhere else if one day you decided to stop using iOS and you wanted to use Android instead. Okay, you were effectively screwed. That is changing. Granted, the spec has to be, that ability has to be adopted by the password manager of choice, by the tech giant of choice, whatever. Okay, but that capability is coming, so something to really think about. But any of the tech giants really supports passkeys right now, and you could store it within your account if you wanted to. If you don't trust passkeys at this moment, or you're waiting until you can export, import them, you might want to wait for that. Again, ultimately, I'm not a big fan of passkeys. I think that they are more convenient. Um, in some ways, they're more secure, though not as transportable as passwords at this time. Um, so, I totally understand if you don't want to take advantage of those, and really very few services use them anyway. Okay. Uh, but that's really something to think about. Okay. And passkeys, again, they're really not in my recommendation at this time. They're more convenient potentially, because they're not always convenient, but they're perhaps more convenient than passwords. But in my opinion, if you're using a really great password manager, which that's probably going to be part 3 of our cybersecurity series, is talking about password managers, even though we'll touch on it briefly here. If you're using a really great password manager, um, it will, like, its abilities to autofill and everything make passkeys honestly somewhat redundant. Okay, somewhat. Other than the fact that, yeah, passwords are, inherently like a security flaw, even though it's what we've been using for decades, as far as, our accounts go, in the digital world. So, Microsoft, let's get back to it. With Microsoft, if you're wanting, maybe you want to shack up with Microsoft with everything you do, like your setup is Windows, Android, right? Okay, Microsoft is an interesting choice for that. Google is also another possible choice, especially since you're using Android. All right. And you're getting everything done through Google. I'm going to talk about that more in a second. All right. But the one, and this is really going to be true outside of every OS type besides something made by Apple, though even it could apply to Apple as well. My opinion, Proton Mail is the account to have because it can end-to-end encrypt all of your documents, all of your storage through Proton Drive, everything, and potentially even end-to-end encrypt through email. So if you're far more, and it's important to start off with this as well, if you're far more operating system agnostic for some reason, even though and maybe that's because like you are regularly shifting what your one device is. You're jumping between devices, which there's an interesting threat model to play out within that concept. Proton Mail or Proton Pass or just Proton AG, right? Is a great option to go with. Okay, as far as account minimalism goes, you're getting Proton Pass. You have a great, that's an excellent password manager. You have all of that storage, um, encrypted, end-to-end encrypted storage, end-to-end encrypted email, and you even have a VPN. You get a lot of great benefits with a Proton Mail account. Okay, now you'd get a lot of those benefits also with Microsoft. Might not all be, if any of it is even end-to-end encrypted, okay, which runs into its own problem. But you have that option with Microsoft. And I mean, I would say, Microsoft accounts might have the benefit if you're going to pay for like, Microsoft 365 or something like that. There's the benefit of having, say, access to Copilot, right, the generative AI. And really, Microsoft has come out with an impressive array of creative tools that are so easy to use. It's really mind blowing. Um, but anyway, you do get access to that AI. I would say though, I mean, Proton is already baking in some AI options into its platform anyway. So, Copilot, I mean, I doubt it's going to match up to Copilot partly because Proton's AI, generative AI option is going to be privacy respecting. Okay. And unless you're going to set up a whole new server type and farm like Apple is doing, um, it's going to be a more limited product. So something to really keep in mind. Okay. But if your one device is Windows, then yeah, going with Microsoft might be the best option. Or conversely, Proton is definitely the direction I would be looking in. Okay, if you are in Android, if your one device is going to be Android, is Google the way to go? Yeah, I mean it makes sense, right? They offer everything, and you have to have a Gmail account no matter what if you're using Android. I consider that a little bit of a flaw, but okay. But once again, this is an area probably where I would recommend going with Proton as far as that goes, as far as like that one account to have where, all your stuff is secured. Okay. Now, if you're looking at, Chromebooks, again, Google might be what actually makes sense, but Proton is also available there. If you're looking at Linux, this is where Proton, in my opinion, is the only, real option to go with as far as having a, because again, the account you want to have, part of what we talked about in device minimalism, like I mentioned, is what happens if you lose the device? Are you screwed? You don't want it to be that way because you're putting so much of your digital life into this thing. Okay, and it's because you kind of have to. You always have a choice to run off to a cave, yes, but otherwise you kind of have to. Okay. Um, so and that's part of what I'm getting at here is how to have that infinitely replicable device. And so with Linux, I think Proton Mail is really the direction to go with that. Yeah, have external hard drives, all that stuff, run a NAS and blah blah blah, and that's all fine too. And actually having like a Synology NAS as where all of your all your stuff backs up to, and really having the NAS kind of be your ultimately be your one device is certainly an interesting direction to go. Okay, that I haven't really addressed, and I might address in a future episode, but that's certainly an interesting direction to go. Okay, but if you're using Linux devices of any stripe, yeah, I think Proton is like the one account to have. Okay, if you're using Apple, it's pretty simple. Like I would keep rocking, the Apple account. You could do Proton, almost as efficaciously as you could with any of the other devices that I talked about, even though they're a little more open with what they allow third parties to do within their platforms. A third party like Proton, Proton, will do 99% of what it can do on any other platform on in Apple's ecosystem. So that's also, a solid option to have. Okay. Um, Now, expanding beyond, basically what device you're going with and what tech giant or, smaller but very effective privacy and encryption focused company like Proton, um, going beyond that, account minimalism becomes a pretty basic concept. Okay. As in, you want to, if you can check out as a guest on a lot of, digital storefronts, do so, right? If you don't need, um, to make an account for something, don't do it. Like eBay. eBay, you can always check out as a guest. It'll try to push you into creating an account, but you can always check out as a guest. Okay. And so ultimately, you just want to make as few accounts as possible overall, because every account you make is ultimately an attack vector against you. And yes, you're going to use a great password manager. So all of your passwords should be different and that shouldn't be a problem. Okay. But ultimately, you want to open as few as possible. You want to be able to keep track of that. All right, now, great service to use if right now you've completely lost track of how many accounts you have. A great service to use is something like Delete Me. Okay, that's the name of it, Delete Me. They're not a sponsor. I'm just saying they do this very well, where they actively operate to give you the ability to eliminate accounts, your presence online, things like this. It's a very useful service. To achieve this level of I mean, in one sense, it's privacy, but really we're talking about security here. Okay. So, with that in mind, all right, of having as few accounts as possible, the concern, or the primary concern, there's others, but the primary concern with this is that you become party to a data leak, some kind of breach, security breach at said company that you made an account with. Okay, now with the tech giants, that becomes increasingly more difficult. It's not to say it's impossible, but it becomes increasingly more difficult. And certainly companies like Apple and others do their best to not be able to even be responsible for your data. So that even if there was some kind of breach against the company, it's all encrypted. We don't have a goddamn clue, right? That's what you want those companies to be able to say, and that should be put under consideration when you're choosing what accounts you make and which ones you don't. Okay, how much do you trust said company to manage your data or to be able to withstand sustained, cyber attacks? Right. This is important. Okay. So, in one sense, because with a lot of data breaches, it's a matter of if, not, or it's a matter of when, not if, right? So, while you want to use a different password everywhere you go, in a world that, in a world, in a world where we're still generally running off of usernames and passwords, and that username is usually an email address. Okay. If it's just a username, always use a different username whatever account you make. But if your username is an email, this is where you want to consider, okay, with what account that you're making, can I create a one-time, what they like a throwaway email, or what some services call hide my email, that you can plug into as your username, and what you make your account with. This goes a long way to helping with, I mean, because as much as you want to engage in account minimalism, you can only go so far without handicapping yourself in the modern world. Okay. So being able to use a, more pseudonymous email, as in not giving away your primary email address, is a wonderful thing. And this has become a very popular service. Okay. DuckDuckGo offers it. In fact, DuckDuckGo is seemingly, they're starting to create services akin to what Proton is doing. Firefox seems to kind of be going in that same direction as well. Okay, like this option of hiding your email is really becoming a standard. okay, of a pseudonymous email, one-time pseudonymous emails. And I applaud that's becoming a standard. This is where I think having your one account be a Microsoft account could be a little bit of a problem because they're the one of the bunch that I've talked about so far. Them and Google are the ones that don't offer this. As far as I know, something could have changed recently and I didn't get the memo. That's possible. Okay, but they don't offer that. But Proton offers it. Like I said, you can do it through DuckDuckGo. Um, Apple does it through uh, iMail or iCloud Mail. Uh, and as far as the ones we've talked about, like those are kind of the big winners. Like I said, really Proton and Apple. Okay, so that has you covered. And they automatically go through the process. They offer to do it, through their password manager or whatever. And it's really, in my opinion, it's an important way to do that. Okay, this is why I wanted to talk about email because it is essential to practicing account minimalism. Okay, now let's get into the dangers because this doesn't have to be a super long episode. I think when you hear account minimalism, like you just get it instantly why this is a good idea. Like it just clicks. Okay, so I don't have to talk a whole ton about it. But this is really, really important. This is the trick you want to implement. Okay. If you listened to a recent real-time Sovryn that I did with um, BP, incredible man of the stage that I did with BP, he talked about how his troupe, his acting group, his improv group, Dorks and Dungeons, how they don't actually use a full-on website, right? Like they used to have a website and they just stopped doing that, and now they basically have a link tree. I've done the same thing, okay, where I just have a link tree that leads to other sites that can handle a lot of the security. Okay. My reasons for doing this, uh, I mean, there's a few, but when I had like ZombieOfflineGames.com, when that website, and that website doesn't exist anymore, but when that was, really hot and happening a few years ago, um, I would be dealing with so many attempted exploits against that site. It was a real problem. I mean, I was dealing with thousands, sometimes a day, sometimes a week, sometimes a month, like depending upon what I talked about seemingly the previous week. I mean, like it was almost a full-time job managing that. Okay, so I'm very much over that. All right. Um, but regardless, okay. But anyway, so the point I'm getting to with that is, having this link tree that just shares, where you want people to find you, maybe even shares your email address, whatever. Again, make that, a not your primary email address for people to reach you. I think that's a very beneficial thing. Now, the way to do that though is you still want to give people like a custom URL, right? Okay. So for example, I have nwo.red, right? That's a URL that I use a lot right now. I have others, I have sovereigntech.com, all of that. All right. Those, I keep the URLs, even though I don't keep the websites. I keep the URLs. Yes, you have to pay a yearly fee to do so. Okay. But I keep the URLs and I keep them independent of that one account. Okay. And whatever, domain registrar you want to go through, you take your pick. I use Namecheap. I'll certainly, I'll mention that. Okay. And I lock down Namecheap. Like the two accounts that I lock the fuck down, I lock down every account, but the ones that I really make sure I lock down is my Apple account and my Namecheap account. Those are the two most important accounts that I have. Okay. And I'm going to explain why. Because um, Namecheap, all right, again, holds all my URLs, and that's basically my listing in the phone book online, right? That's me in the yellow pages or white pages, however you consider me. Okay. Uh, of the the phone book that is the internet, that is DNS, right? So making sure that those are secured. Yeah, I mean that's going through YubiKey. I mean, like I'm taking every step I possibly can, all right, to make sure that my Namecheap account does not get broken into. Okay. Um, Now, within that, all right, and this is where things get really key. So I can change, like I said, my URLs, I can change wherever I want sovryntech.com to point to. Okay, if I wanted to go to a link tree, you can do that. If I wanted to go to, my podcasts like main page on Spotify for podcasts or something, I can make it do that. All right, I can point that wherever I want to. And that's important because, websites can get taken down, right? Um, accounts can get taken down or can get shut down on you. If you're that kind of a troublemaker or if there's some kind of horrible mistake or whatever, that can occur. So having control of URLs, your own URLs, is a really, really key thing. Okay. Now, while this is just as important for leading people to whatever website you want them to go to, this is just as important for email. All right. Because what you're going to want to do is you may have, like, let's say you're using an Apple account, okay, and you're going through, through Apple Mail. Um, you may have everything go into your Apple Mail inbox, but what you can actually do is you can have your URLs, say like sovryn-tech.com or something like that, forward or connect to your Apple account and connect to your Apple Mail. Okay. Here's the thing, and this is why it's really, really key, because the reason to do this, because you can do this with Proton as well. You can do it with just about anything. The reason to do this is if Apple, for some reason, shut down my Apple account, took it away from me, whatever that happens to be, though that'd be like a disaster scenario for anyone. And, outside of Kim Jong-il, I don't know, who they'd even try that on. But regardless, if they did, worst case scenario, right? Hope for the best, plan for the worst. Only the paranoid survive. Being properly paranoid, if I lost access, say, to my iCloud account, to my Apple account, or my Apple ID, um, and that's where all my emails were, and I needed to get access to other accounts, sign into things, whatever, change my email address. Unless the other accounts I was trying to go to, had great reset options where I could change the email address that they go to or whatever. But even that can be a real pain in the ass and sometimes can hold up your ability to access accounts for days, if not weeks, even a month. Okay. If I control the URL of the email that I'm giving to people, then I can change from Namecheap. I can point, my MX servers with the mail servers. I can point where mail is going to another service. Basically, I could instantly have my email that's going to Apple Mail instead go to Proton Mail by just changing my MX records, CNAME and all that, and pointing it all towards um, towards the other account. So that's why I say it's really key. And this is the essential thing to understand in account minimalism. You never want to lose access to basically to your custom URLs. All right. And you never want to just host them, under your one account either. Right. People kind of learned this lesson with Google, where Google lets you lets you register domain names with them. And then they ended that whole service and you had to export it or whatever. Fortunately, Google warned you about that, but you never know when someone might not. So, you, keeping control of your URLs, buying a custom URL and having that kind of be your namesake, your entry in the phone book of the internet is a really, really key part of having, of having the most efficacious and effective account minimalism. Okay. Now, if you're using like the hide my email feature, say with Apple Mail, like, yeah, you're going to lose, I don't think that Apple does hide my mail through, um, like through your custom domains. Though it may allow for that. I have not looked into that, but that's something to consider as well. Okay. Um, but that's basically it. Is the really key thing, okay, is to be able to have your email, because your email is like the baseline of your internet identity. Okay. And having that email not be controlled by Gmail, not even be controlled by Apple Mail, not be controlled by Outlook, not even be controlled by Proton. Okay. You want it to be on a completely separate account. Like I said, I use Namecheap, and have it be under a domain name that you ultimately have control over. Now, if you want to go so far, because maybe you're concerned, well, they're going to know because I have to register with ICANN, my who is information, and they're going to know that I also own the Namecheap account. So if they want to shut down my Apple account or my Google account or my Microsoft account, well, then they're going to come after my Namecheap too. Well, then set up your Namecheap. You can't do it necessarily. You can't really do it pseudonymously, but you can kind of do it anonymously. Okay. But you might still run it, into issues with that. All right. Like I said, that's getting into a serious nation state game. And that's really where your options become extremely limited. Okay. But you really, for very dumb reasons, invalid reasons, you can lose access to your accounts with any one of the tech giants. Okay. So you want to mitigate that by having some control of your digital identity that exists outside of them. And in my opinion, the best way to do that, outside of, maybe going with Proton, okay, the best way to do that is to own your own URL, have your own domain name, and learn how to, be able to forward, where your domain name, like what website it goes to, how to get it to go, how to move which, where the emails show up, which service the emails show your email shows up in, and all this. And that's really the way to very much mitigate that. Now you're still going to lose, you're going to lose all of that email, right? If you happen to lose one of those accounts, but at least you're not losing the email address when you're able to instantly redirect who's able to receive that email, or what service is able to receive that email address. So that's a really key thing to consider. Okay. I don't, again, and this is just as true for websites as it is for email. I don't really believe in having like a website where like the website and the URL, like the hosting and the URL are baked in together. Okay. I've run into where like that anyway, there's just issues, a lack of nomadry or portability or even adaptability, that allows for, or that eliminates, in my opinion. That's not a good thing. I want to be more portable. I want to be adaptable. I want to be able to shift quickly. Okay. I want to be able to, if I'm focusing hard on Instagram, say, I want sovereigntech.com maybe to point at my Instagram, or I want these things to be able to point at, very specific things. And you want it to be a URL you've had for a while and that you've constantly put out there. Okay. Because that way, people might stop listening to you, or people, whatever, they might not follow you anymore. But at some point they'll remember, oh, I wonder what this person's up to. And they'll remember your URL if you got a great URL. And that's a completely separate conversation because that's more about marketing than it is cybersecurity. But if you have a great, URL, they're going to remember it and they're going to put it in, and they're going to end up even years later where you want them to end up. So this is a pretty key thing, to have. And, maybe even you have the URL point at like some quasi anonymous blog post where it says, hey, yeah, I left and ran off to a cave. Feel free to reach me via carrier pigeon, and, just have it go, 6 degrees northwest, you know what I mean? Like, you could do that. Okay. Um, so that's my point, is engage in account minimalism. But really, account minimalism doesn't work very. There's two key factors to account minimalism, and we'll just recover them here. Okay, you pick one tech giant basically to run with. You do not, I know you're thinking, oh, I don't want all my chickens in one basket. Okay, the way you mitigate the chickens in one basket, okay, or eggs in one basket, whatever, however that metaphor goes, the way you mitigate that is by having control, having your second account be something where you control what the domain names do. Whether it's, redirects via, like website redirects, or, MX records for mail pointing elsewhere. Okay. That, having control of your own URL, that is just absolutely fucking essential. Okay. For this to really work. So pick one of the tech giants, right? Again, do I like them? No. Do I trust them? No. But in our modern world, to have some degree of better cybersecurity, okay, it's really, it's the direction you kind of have to go. Kind of. Again, we could talk about NASA's There are a bunch of other ways that this could be done, but I'm giving you, like a more simple answer that I think most people could actually implement. All right, get everything into that one spot, because also if at some point you want to change your mind, it's easy to just migrate everything elsewhere because it's all in one spot and you can just download it all and uh, and then port it elsewhere if you want to do that. Okay. But then the second part of that, of course, is have control of your domain names. Have your own domain name, have control of that, be somewhere else, right? Because another option would be like with email would be Fastmail, right? I love Fastmail. I don't have any beef with Fastmail. There's some features I wish they had, but I don't really have any problem with Fastmail. Okay. The thing is, if your Fastmail account, often the way that you don't have to do it this way, but Fastmail offers to host your domain name. Okay. And I've done this. For many years I had done this. You can host your domain name there. The thing is, if you lose access to your Fastmail account and your domain name is also attached to your Fastmail account, as in it's hosted by Fastmail, you're screwed. You're just screwed. Do I think Fastmail will play ball? I don't know if they would. Play ball with certain requests, shall we say, from nation state actors. Uh, that again, that's a roll of the dice that I'm just not willing to take. It's nothing against Fastmail, okay? Because all I'm saying is you can use Fastmail. It doesn't have the password manager. We're going to get into that in episode 3 or part 3 of this cybersecurity subseries, okay? Um, but you can use Fastmail. Just I would recommend not having them host your URL. Okay, don't have them host your domain name. That's all. Okay, so that's it. Pick a tech giant, get your own domain name, and redirect from there in the ways that you want. And you pick your registrar, whichever one you're comfortable with, going with, and you're going to end up. I mean, and it's not only. Here's the beautiful thing, because it's just like with device minimalism, where it's not just about security. It's also about just like clearing your own mental bandwidth. It's like, okay, I don't have to worry about 6 devices. Just like, okay, I don't have to worry about 5 different email accounts or 5 different accounts on whatever devices. Like instead, you're only having to worry about really one, though ultimately 2, right? Because of the one that's hosting your domain names. And then everything else is adaptable at that point. Everything else is portable at that point. Okay. So that's it for this real-time Sovryn. And like I said, for part 3 of our cybersecurity subseries, we're going to talk about password managers and what I recommend based upon what your, overall like device loadout looks like. Okay? So with that, I will see all of you on the other side. Someone could someone turn off the satellite uplink? Let's kill that. Great. See you on the other side.